When his plan to inherit his older wife's money backfire, a murderous gold digger seeks out a new target. But the woman he finds is not the pushover he's used to dealing with. In the 1955 suspense drama, Cast a Dark Shadow. And that's the movie we're dusting off this week on Movie Bones.
Nosy Parkering, was he?
That's a good match, Teddy. You have an eye for colour, haven't you, dear?
Why did he come?
I asked him to call, dear. I must make a will, Teddy.
A will, Molly?
I'm so pleased with my pieces. Clever teddy bear. Always thinking of little ways to make me happy, aren't you, dear? Nothing's ever too much trouble.
Well, I look after Molly today, and Molly looks after me tomorrow. Well, I slipped up that time, Molly. You wanted to look after me. I shall have to think again. One thing's certain, though. Somebody's got to pay my passage.
And that is the voice of Edward Teddy Barr, or Teddy Bear, I guess, played by Dirk Bogarde, lamenting his own short-sighted murder of his elderly wife in true psychopathic fashion with cold calculation and no remorse or regret, save for the fact that it was a slight oversight in his part, so...
You know, there was a point in that little scene that we just listened to and everything, but I was sitting there questioning in the film. I was like, did he actually love her? You know, like, I wondered. It made me actually wonder, maybe he actually did somewhat, not a lot. I want to make that very clear. To do what he did, you know, which we know what he did now, but to do what he did, you have to have some kind of ill will feeling toward them. But, like, in those little scenes where he's, like, kind of talking, you know, to her, you know, obviously the rocking chair and everything, I did wonder. And I was like, you know, maybe there's like some sick, twisted part of him that actually did care about her.
Well, you know, and that's an interesting question. And I think the very opening credit sequence itself actually kind of gives you some inclination as to his mental state, because you can see either on the ride that the I guess it's what do they call it? One of those, you know what it is? It's like a scare ride, it's a jump scare ride, the kind you get at a local fairground or something. It's rather cheap and set up that way, but there's a bunch of really scary things, and you can see the difference in their faces is that she's having, you know, this old woman is having a normal emotional response to this stimuli, whereas you have Teddy, or Edward, he's when the camera goes to his face, it's just a blank slate. He doesn't respond emotionally, and that indicates to me very quickly, it's like, this guy is not normal, but from what I understand of what psychopathy is that he's not normal in a very particular way. But at least during those scenes, and I think this is a guy who is totally out just for whatever relationship he has is always comes back to what's in it for him. And I think he'd be perfectly happy if it was the case to let her die naturally, because he's still living on the dole on her, right? That's the whole thing. He's living off of her money. And what he says about, you know, need someone to pay his passage. The only reason why he chose to go to murder at that point is because he falsely believed that she was about to change the will to something that would be disadvantageous for him rather than be advantageous from something that actually wasn't going to benefit him. He actually shot himself in the foot. But even that, you can see that the emotional response, an ordinary person who'd gone to that much trouble, it would at least, you'd see some kind of response, but he's still pretty cold and calculating. And it's nothing more than a slight mistake on his part, you know? He's just back on it again, right?
Yeah. he just turns, yeah, you're absolutely right. The character. And I like the fact that, sorry, this is kind of beside the point. I like the fact that his name is Teddy Bear.
It is, right? Because a cute, cuddly teddy bear who's also, you know, who's also a psychopath.
That's the thing about these kind of like stories. He's meant to be that young, attractive person dating someone who's obviously rich. Yeah. That's always what I think is kind of funny or amusing about that. It's like the old rich person dies under mysterious circumstances, and everybody in the world's just kind of like looking at him. You know, like that happens all the time. It's like we're all looking at that person like, wonder what you did. and like, yeah, you know, he managed to, you know, get off scot-free for the most part because, you know, they weren't able to prove it was him. But I mean, everyone's still kind of like, even in the movie, everyone's still kind of like, Yeah, you're the person that truly didn't,
As far as legal standards go, he did a pretty good job. I mean, if you're going to plot, as far as these plots go, he did a pretty convincing job of like setting it up so that, at least in his day and age, you would set yourself up to probably get away with it. I'm sure there's something that I'm missing in terms of, forensics and he's like, no, Justin. Actually, even back then they would have been able to. And it's like, okay, whatever. I don't know those things. But at least from an audience perspective, it seemed very plausible, didn't it?
Yeah, it seemed plausible. The only thing that doesn't seem plausible is, just look at the people, even if they get off scot-free, we're like, we know you did it.
Yeah. I mean, and our system of justice does give the defendant a lot of rights for good reason. I mean, one person sent to jail erroneously is a greater crime. At least I'm speaking from my own principles now, but also the principles that we're supposedly built on is that the one false conviction. I think even Benjamin Franklin said something like this: is that one false conviction is worse than 100 that go free.
Yeah,
because of that.
And the beautiful thing there is, like, in this particular movie, is we do actually have the character who is a lawyer, who is like, yeah, dude, I know you did it.
And rightfully so. He doesn't actually jump the gun, though. He doesn't jump the gun.
Yeah.
He waits for the right moment.
The not jumping the gun, it provides what I did think was a pretty fun twist. Like, I would say it was like the one twist, and I was like, huh. I mean, I should have seen that coming, but it's still a fun twist. I did not see it coming, to be honest with you. I was expecting something to happen like that, but there's a fun twist in this movie.
Well, go ahead and say it. Go ahead. What is it?
Well, the twist that one lady was her sister.
Yes. Okay.
I thought that was a fun twist.
The first time when I watched it, I didn't see that either. There are hints when I'm watching the second time. You can see, well, okay, her behavior is kind of indicative of that. I think she was going to be a renter there, like the other one, or she was thinking of something like that. You can tell that it wasn't just about that. But the one who plays his would-be second victim, his second wife, I really liked what she did. And
yeah, absolutely.
She's actually already going to be on a list of, I think if we do our thing at the end of the year, she's going to be like top 5 actresses, I think, so far. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I loved every scene that she was in. She ate it up. Every scene that she was in, it was just like phenomenal. Phenomenal. In fact, I kind of expected her to expose the whole entire thing. There was even one point I was sitting there going, she has to know more than she's letting on.
Well, I could give you some advice, but you might not like it.
If the truth hurts, I can take it.
Look around, trundle up the aisle again.
Get married. You're a fine one to give advice, Mrs. Jeffries. Why don't you take a leaf out of your own book?
Well, to be perfectly honest, there have been several occasions when I very nearly have. And then I found it was the money bags they were after and not the old bag herself.
Oh, Mr. Bear'd go raving mad. It's only opened up once a week for me to dust.
From now on, Amy, it isn't only what Mr. Bear wants. Come on, open up.
What a say.
Well, anyone would think it was Bluebeard's chamber. Blimey, it is.
Never let me see you in that room again.
I told you.
You know, if he'd had any more wives, I'd have had to sleep in the bathroom.
She not only has great lines, but she inhabits the skin of those lines. I mean, she's full of that spirit that I love. And you just don't see enough of it coming from that era,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And she's definitely that, 30s movie, 30s feminist role. She's a very independent person. She still plays into the world that she's in, but she's incredibly independent. She's incredibly smart. She's got a good head on her shoulders, and she knows her own flaw. That's what makes this such a good, makes her character so good. When I say good, it works so well, and she works so well with the character. The character knows her own flaw, her biggest flaw. And her biggest flaw is she'll let her heart get in the way of her head. She admits that. That's the beautiful thing. She admits that at the very end of the movie, after everything is settled down, she says to herself and to the audience, because we're the only ones there with her at the time. And she says this was able to happen because of this. Because she knew that, it just made her character all that, just the much more, enjoyable.
More real feeling, yeah.
Very more real, because, there is a point in time you're going, I can't believe you're falling for this. And then again, you have her little self-reveal of, this is because she allowed herself, she allowed her heart to get in the way of her head.
And I also get the impression that from the portrayal, too, is that she feels like she understands it. And she has experienced a lot of the world. She's not some doe-eyed kind of naive person.
Yeah.
But I think she gets the impression that she's experienced enough that she can handle herself even, and she can see all the things. It's a little overconfidence on her part, perhaps. But I get that, too, because her personality is also very well conveyed as being that kind of person who's use the things I've learned. I'm a very practical person kind of a thing. And on top of all that, it makes her the perfect foil for him.
Mm-hmm.
Because even though she doesn't see his true or suspect his true nature yet, it's like she's still able to stand up to him. She's able to frustrate him and stymie him where no one else at this point really gets under his skin that same way. Not even the guy who's the lawyer dude is like, he doesn't get under his skin. But this woman does, And he doesn't realize it, funny enough, until after he quickly marries her, That's the funny part. It's like he thought he had another woman under his thumb, and it turns out not so much, Now, that doesn't mean he's a pushover either, though, right?
No, he's definitely not a pushover. Like, have you ever seen the show Criminal Minds and everything?
I have not, no.
Okay, so there's this show called Criminal Minds. Some of our audience people might know what I'm talking about. Their bad guy is always called the unsub. I don't really know off the top of my head. I forget what that means. But anyways, it's just the person that is, they're chasing. It's about, people like psychopaths and things like that who have committed heinous crimes, serial killers, things like that. Like the character will start, out doing something smart, like what our character in this movie did. He did start out doing something smart. They get to this point and they plateau and then they start dropping off the cliff, meaning they start de-evolving. They start becoming sloppier. They start becoming frustrated because you can't maintain that what they are forever. That I was thinking about that a little bit as this movie goes on. And anytime we deal with a character that has these kind of tendencies, I think about that because like eventually, yes, they're made out to be, oh, I've committed the perfect crime. I'm getting away with it. One of two things happen to them. They'll either keep pushing too far, like he was kind of doing, or they'll have like a foil of some sort. And again, he's got that same thing. He's got a foil, and then it forces him to break down. Now, I would make an argument that he's got multiple foils, not just Frida. I think that's how you say her name.
Yeah, Frida.
His second wife, but also Charlotte. You would look at them as both the femme fatale, except they're both playing in the just roles. Frida was just, she was a good person, even though she was naive. And Charlotte was just trying to, bring her sister justice and everything. But they're still kind of the femme fatales because of what winds up happening.
Yeah, Charlotte's the one who brings it home. And as much as I like Frida, and she does have the bulk of the two women, she has the bulk of the screen time between them. But I love what Charlotte, the character, let's see, what's her name is, I love what...
Kay Walsh?
Kay Walsh, yeah. What she does with the role, because it's just as strong, but in a different way. It's like there's that scene between them getting close to the end where she's confronting him directly with what she knows. Obviously, he's figured it out for himself. And he's threatening her and trying to get her to go because he's cut her brake line. And she doesn't know that, but she also suspects that if she leaves, it's worse off. And she understands that she's safer, actually, in his presence. And she keeps tormenting him. I have to say, I've never seen that before, where the object is to stay put for the woman who's in that situation. And that's what actually drives him more and more, off the rails a bit. It's a different kind of strength. And actually, in doing so, I thought about it some more. It's like they passed the lampshade test, the sexy lampshade. They passed the test. They actually have a conversation that's not about men, but not about him. And it's actually has to do with the plot and everything. It's great.
And my only critique, not of what you're saying, I think you're absolutely correct. I do feel like there's times, though, it just kind of it'll put one to the side. And, you're like, okay, it's not very long because it's not a very long movie. I feel like the movie could have been longer because I would have liked to get to know just a little bit more about Charlotte, even if it didn't give us that twist, or even if it didn't tell us a twist right away where she's the sister and everything. I just wanted to know more about her. I wanted to see her interact a little bit more. And then when she's interacting, there are times when she's interacting with Teddy, I feel like there's times with Frida, she's pushed to the side by the story, not by the characters. And it's like, oh, what's she doing? What's she up to? What is her whole role in this? They did a very good job. I want to make this very clear. They did a very good job of not just sidelining her to a point where she doesn't make any sense to the story. But, I would have liked to see her maybe fall just a little bit more in love with Teddy. That's a big thing, with her character at the end. We're told it, she says that she's fallen in love with him, but I wanted to see a little bit more of it.
I think you're spot on with that. I mean, and the more you talk about it, the more I feel it, is that, there could be more set up for that emotionally, that, that ending where she confesses that, her heart did lead her head. And that kind of leads into another point I had, is that I actually had a theory running in my head the first time I watched this, that Frida was actually kind of playing the same game that Edward was, and that she was a psychopath too. I thought that maybe they'd be playing off each other, and because he presented himself as having the money. Now, he was lying about that. That would have made him an excellent target for someone who was equally minded as he was, someone who would date him in return for the same thing that he's trying to get out of them, right?
I kind of had a similar feeling, except my thought was that she would just join him. Like, I thought, I could see this going in a Bonnie and Clyde route. Not join him doing the stupid thing he does, but like to maybe get rid of Charlotte. I thought maybe they would go that route.
Yeah, and I still think that would be a great idea. So, hey, anyone's making movies out there, please, take this idea up or let us know of a film that does that, because it's actually kind of an interesting concept. If I'm not thinking of one off the top of my head, I'd love to hear a name of one or have someone out there take the idea to its conclusion, because that sounds really cool. But I'm not disappointed for the direction it did take. There's plenty of strong stuff here. You ever had a movie that kind of, you're watching it going along and then something comes up just totally unrelated to the story or the characters? There's just some kind of background element that kind of gives you a piece of nostalgia that's totally unrelated to the film?
Possibly.
Because this happened to me in this film, actually. And when I was a kid, my parents took me to Disney World several times. Okay? And there's like the dark light rides. Have you ever been on a dark light ride?
No, I have not.
It's basically, it's dark in there, obviously, but they have a bunch of UV lights that are aimed toward the walls. And usually it lands on something that highlights some special effect on a wall that makes it look like there's more going on in the background than there actually is, because, well, you're basically in a finite room that's supposed to be looking like a larger atmosphere, a larger environment. So there's a scene in this movie when they're on the balcony where Frida and Edward are talking on the balcony about marriage and all that kind of stuff that we actually played a clip from earlier. And there's this ocean in the background. But if you look at that scene, it's so clearly painted on with like flickery light type stuff. And, like, I don't know if they had a fan blowing on it, to make the little kind of sequins or ever flutter. Mm. But they were supposed to be waves in the moonlight. It's a very artistic representation of that. But it did bring that back because it was done well enough that it's like, that actually looks like a ride I've been on, So it's like, the film is not for special effects, but I had to mention that at least that for my own personal sake, there's a little bit of nostalgia factor there trying to brought me into a certain memory. So where are you going to come down on this movie, man?
I think I'm going to come down on a trust me. I think I would have probably gone even higher than that if this movie was just longer.
I hear you.
That's the issue. That's the only issue I have with this movie. It's such a good, well-acted movie about all the people that are in it. And, it's a unique story. Well, it's not a unique story, but I mean, it's unique in its own way. It could tell more of the story.
If anyone's into the genre of like that it's in specifically, that kind of suspense drama, I think this movie would probably even be as far as a Fortune and Glory for someone like that. For me personally, I'm not like specifically attracted to that genre as much. So for me, like, I'm with you. This is a trust me. I totally recommend it. Yeah. Especially like I said, if this is a genre that you fall naturally into anyway. So, and that's this week's film pretty much, folks. There's nothing else to talk about that film, but let's talk about what next week's film is, Ryan, and tell the folks what we've got planned for them.
Next week is I feel like I've heard this guy's name before. Sorry, I'm looking at the names. Next week is a film, Tubi says, a corporate drone hatches a scheme for success. Let the execs use his apartment for dates. That's in quotation marks, so I'm sure that's not good. It goes beautifully until his love interest gets hurt. This movie is starring Jack Lemmon. I don't know why, but I know that name. Shirley MacLaine. I do know that person. And Fred McMurray, directed by Billy Wilder, who directed Sunset Boulevard. So hopefully we got another banger on our docs here. But this movie is 1960s movie titled The Apartment.
The Apartment from 1960, yes. So yeah, that should be interesting. I mean, it'll be the second Billy Wilder film I think I've ever seen. So nice to chalk up number 2 on that list. So and
there's so many years apart too. So
yeah, because it was 1950, I think, was Sunset Boulevard, wasn't it? I think it was. Ryan's got his Google Foo going today.
Let's see. Yeah, you're right. It's 1950.
Yeah. You see, usually my memory is terrible with these dates, but because I always have to double, triple check myself, and it's good that I do because when I upload these videos, because otherwise I think I'd be getting them wrong all over the place. But for some reason, I actually happen to be right this time. So, but never count on me for dates, folks. Not those kind of dates, at least. So I guess until next week, folks, we'll see you guys out there next week. And Ryan, I'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Leave me alone, I know too much. While you stay around, I'll just play around with love.